So, good day students, and welcome to the second nugget on biomass for energy. Today we will talk about the most fundamental unit in living materials, namely the cell. The reason to use biomass as one source for energy is the simple fact, as pointed out in the previous nugget, that it contains stored solar energy. The mechanism to store this energy is the photosynthesis. And the place where the energy is stored is in the plant cells. So the plant cells and their properties play a fundamental role as biomass for energy is concerned, and you need to understand a little bit about that to understand the fundamental properties of the biomass. You will recognize that from the second introductory nugget to the course. The International Standards Biomass Classification actually reflects fundamental difference at the cell level. And since these differences make different biomasses more or less well suited for different conversion technologies, they will influence the whole supply chain, and which end user is finally best supplied from a specific raw material. Now, we will not go into all the details of the living cells, but we will take a very simplified view to it. Since cells are not covered in the BusyPlan handbook, you will use two other sources for this, and that is one open source textbook in biology, plus the distance learning material available from the Carnegie Mellon University. And you will find the links in this slide. This slide illustrates the sizes of some cells from unicellular organisms like bacteria, about 1 micrometer, to ostrich eggs, about 1 decimeter or bigger. The typical sizes of plant and animal cells are rather small, and that is because a living cell is exchanging material with the surrounding. This exchange occurs across the cell membrane. We will soon look closer at the cell membrane because that is one crucial part of the cell. But anyway, the membrane is the part that filters the in and out flows, and it is also the part of the cells that maintains water and salt balances, etc. And since the external surface area per unit volume decreases with increasing diameter, then the membrane area per unit volume would decrease with increasing cell size. So then the cell metabolism would become limited by the available area of the cell membrane as the cell becomes bigger. You will find the same information expressed in a different way in the Carnegie Mellon material, page 106. The cells we are interested in are the eukaryotic ones as introduced in section 4.3 in the textbook and on page 107 in the CMU material. Eukaryotic cells are the ones building terrestrial plants as well as any aquatic plants, and they are also the ones building up you and me and all other animals. Now look at the schematic in the Carnegie Mellon material, page 107. You may think that the illustration is a bit childish, but it pinpoints the most important cell processes without going into too much detail. You will find the same thing described in other words in text section 4.3 in the book. As you will understand from these descriptions, will the cytoplasm generally contain a mixture of different salts and of proteins in water. So one crucial thing for the cell is to maintain a proper balance of water and of salts to the surrounding. And this is maintained by the cell membrane. The cell membrane is generally built up by a double layer of phospholipids. The cell membrane is absolutely crucial for the cell function, and it is treated in Module 18, pages 111 through 114 in the material from Carnegie Mellon. In the textbook, you will find that one full chapter chapter 5, is devoted to the cell membrane. Since the interior of the cell then contains salts and other compounds in a water solution, there will be an osmotic pressure gradient across the membrane. You will find an explanation of this phenomenon at a video from Khan Academy. See the link in the slide. Osmosis is also described in text section 5.2 in the book and in module 19, page 121 in the material from Carnegie Mellon. This osmotic pressure gradient may result in an overpressure inside the cell or an underpressure. In the first case, the cell may burst, and in the second case it may shrink. Both cases may lead to the death for the cell. So it becomes obvious that the osmotic pressure depends on how the interior of the cell, the cytoplasm, compares to the cell surrounding. The cell membrane has only very limited mechanical strength, so some cells have extra walls. This applies only to plant cells and is one major distinguishing factor between plant cells and animal cells. Animal cells never have cell walls. They have a cell membrane, but they do not have cell walls. Plant cells have cell walls, and inside the cell wall they too have a cell membrane. But the cell walls are different between different plants. We will now concentrate on terrestrial plant cells, and as a representative of aquatic biomass, we will concentrate only on algae. Terrestrial plants do typically have cell walls made up by a thin primary and a thick secondary cell wall. And the main constituents are cellulose, which is a polysaccharide made from glucose, plus hemicellulose, which is a common name to different polysaccharides, and then lignin, which is a polymer. The composition of lignin can change between species. The cell walls make up the main part of the dry biomass. Woody biomass and herbaceous biomass will both have cell walls made up from cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin. Trees are high and heavy as compared to grasses, herbs and bushes. So the trees need very much more mechanical strength, and this is reflected by a relatively high lignin content in woody biomass. Herbaceous biomass contains a comparatively much higher proportion of cellulose, so it has less mechanical strength and lower compact density. Fleshy fruits successively change their texture during ripening. When not yet ripe, they have thick and strong cell walls. The ripening and softening process includes the disassembly of primary cell walls and the loss of middle lamella. So in the flesh of ripe fruits, most cell walls have degraded and become sugars. Aquatic biomass is in itself not a homogeneous group. Let us first separate kelp from algae. Kelp mainly resembles terrestrial plants as the cell wall structure is concerned. However, since kelp lives in water, it does not need even close to the mechanical strength of trees. Kelp floats, so it does not have to carry its own weight. Consequently, lignin is replaced by other polymers, mainly different xylanes, and basically the rest is cellulose. Algae will exhibit a multitude of different components in the cell walls. This reflects the long history and evolution of algae over those billions of years that they have been around. The main polymers to stabilize the wall is xylene and proteoglycans, not lignin. Blended and mixed biomass may have or not have cell walls, and they can be composed of just anything. So the last category, blends and mixtures, represents lots of biomass from society. Food scrapings from canteens and restaurants will contain a mixture of cooked meat and fish. That is degenerated animal cells without cell walls, but there will still be the phospholipid constituents from the membranes. There will also be vegetables, which is plant cells with their cellulose fibers and cell wall constituents. And then there will also be significant amounts of cooking and frying fats and oils, which are pure lipids. The sewage sludge in the wastewater treatment plant consists to a major part of feces, which is basically food residues after digestion. So this contains those parts of the food that the human digestive system cannot handle or does not need. The organic part is typically less than half the dry substance, and the main part, say 70% of the organic part, is proteins. The rest would be lipids and carbohydrates. More than half the dry substance is typically minerals and inorganic material. The organic part of this material will have no cell walls, and there will basically not be any membranes. Household and office waste will include textiles. Some textiles are cellulose fibers, like cotton or flax. Wool is a protein fiber. But there are also regenerated fibers that are chemically completely different, while they still originate from biocellulose. Household and office waste also includes a lot of paper. Though high-quality paper is more than 50% clay, kaolin, there is still cellulose fiber in paper. There are no cell walls in these fractions, since the fibers to make textiles and paper have been separated from the binder in the cell wall. And part of the household waste will be food scrapings with the same properties as mentioned above. Agricultural activities produces droppings from the animals, and they resemble sewage sludge in composition. There is also straw and other herbaceous biomass composed of cells. Much of the agricultural production today goes to industrial food processing, and from that we will find waste streams containing cells from animals and plants, but we will also find what we could call pure substances, like residual fats, proteins and carbohydrates that have no cell walls. Wood industry and forest operations will generate plant cell waste. This list can be continued. To summarize these things in the roughest way, one can say that the constituents in many plant cell walls are relatively hard and resistant to biological degradations. In ripe fruit and vegetables, like in cooked food, have the cell walls to a great extent already degraded into monosaccharides. In such cases is the biomass easily biodegradable. And the same thing basically applies to cells without cell walls, or to such biomass that contains no cells at all. This means that quite a few biomasses lend themselves well for biogas production through anaerobic digestion, and quite a few lend themselves well to alcohol fermentation. And then some of the biomasses, and especially then mixed biomass from society as well as lignocellulosic biomass, tends to require thermochemical treatment. You will learn more about these processes in the second lesson in this course, where the conversion processes are introduced. And you will also learn more about these things in the fourth lesson, when the biomass and biofuel properties are discussed from a storage point of view. But for now, you have a first idea about what are the constituents of biomass, and you should be capable to do your homework.